go.
Oh, yeah, we're back.
Mindy Stearns.
I'm JD Cargill.
And I'm Michelle Arrego, and this is
Friends Some and Then Some, the best podcast in the world. We started as friends 20 years ago, and now we're still drinking wine together. We started a podcast because we're midlife, and we thought, man, we need to help a whole new generation of millennials with all of our mistakes.
yes.
I just love how he went upstairs.
She cannot even. Okay. You told me to be freewheeling with it. Okay, so we're friends. We met in the news industry. Now we have a podcast. It's all about friendship, and it's about seeing things through midlife lens and our experience.
And we're brutally honest
with each other.
It's just love each
Got the giggles. Maybe because it's our wine munch
Exactly.
episode.
I love these people. I hope you get to love them as much. Well, anyone who listens to us does, because we have 3 listeners, and they're our best friends too.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Oh.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for listening.
Here we
Wait,
are,
you
friends
gotta-
some and then
Oh.
some. Woo!
Woo! There's our favorite cock and yours. We are all excited today because it's our wine day. We've been talking about this for a long
We've
time.
been talking about it a lot. We wanted an excuse
Give me the
to
bottle.
drink during our
Day
podcast.
drink.
I toasted.
And I was like, bing, idea. I actually know somebody.
Michelle knows somebody.
From the past, somebody from the
Oh, I
future,
can't wait to hear
everlasting.
about
Somebody who's
How-
a friend.
Who's done what he said he was going to do
Okay,
back
so
in the day.
This is so interesting talking about wine, because it's, there's so many funny memes online about wine consumption, and I mean, you could have a vault of wine memes, and there is you've seen that one where the guy's jogging down the street and every recycle bin is full of wine and alcohol bottles and empty recycling, and I mean, interestingly enough for me, I haven't drank at all. Other than twice. I did 2 sessions since quarantine because I'm a social drinker.
Yeah.
I love to have wine when we're out with friends and and I haven't been out, so I haven't been drinking. So for me, it's been different. But we did do with some friends a virtual wine tasting with a vineyard in France, and there was like 65 people on, and we had all the wine in front of us. I've got a picture that I can show that, but it was really super unique and fun.
That's
and
really a
so
cool
it was
idea.
fun to be creative and think out of the box. And like, you can't go to the valley, Napa Valley, bring the wine to you, and you can still hear from the winemakers about.
That's awesome.
So that's
what I
kinda
did.
like
God, that
what
would have
we're
been
doing
fun,
here.
right, Michelle?
I
Did you
had
hear about
wine.
that amazing
No,
wine
basically
party they
it
had
was-
on Zoom?
It wasn't. I was invited by someone else that you don't know. It was a guest.
Zoom,
So
Mindy.
whatever.
So that's why I was inspired. I got this delivered. It was so amazing. Poor guy from, what is the
FedEx?
delivery guy? He was like, "Oof, God, this woman must be a drunk."
And
Like,
since we are a podcast, and for those of you, all 4 of you who are listening on your headphones right now, I just want you to know what the scene looks like, because it is something out of, I want to say, reminiscent of a set design piece for Johnny Depp's
see,
Blow.
Michelle-
oh,
It just or maybe The Hangover.
The Hangover.
The Hangover. There's like
The
4 bottles of
elevated
wine on the
version
table.
of The
2 of them are
Hangover.
open, 2 are not. We got
Wine
5 kinds of
tumblers,
cheese.
we've got wine
1, 2,
glasses,
3, 4, at least 8
we've got
glasses.
Stemless,
So that's what we're dealing
stem
with
and
here.
Stemless.
so let's
Podcasters.
just
Stainless.
bring him on in.
Let's do it.
He's
Let's
been a head
Introduce your friend.
wine grower, owner of Melville Winery for over 20 years.
Wow.
We want to welcome him to our Friends Some family, Chad Melville.
Welcome.
Hey, old buddy. What's up, buddy, old pal?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So awesome.
so happy
Mindy,
to have you.
I hear that you haven't been drinking very much during the quarantine, but I got to admit that I've been drinking a lot more
Mhm.
Really?
than ever. And not because I'm quarantined, it's just that's what I do for a living, is I taste wine. And now I just have more time to kind of dig in and
Nice.
try new things and check stuff out.
How's your liver?
Well, yeah.
It tastes
you gotta
delicious.
Counter it, right? Lots of water.
Lots of water,
No,
yeah.
That's so fun. No, but this is an exciting. I mean, I cheated. I went ahead and I already had a swag because
Isn't the rosé great?
So,
Cheers. Hey,
oh my gosh.
let's have a little
I
toast to
love-
Chad for being
to
here.
Chad.
Woo.
We didn't touch any hands in that interaction.
No, it wasn't like Italy. We have our wine glass on a stick. And
We have
we're
a
toasting it.
huge
So just
special
so
effects budget,
people-
folks.
Just so people
we're
know
not even
what we
together.
just dived into. Oh, you
Yeah,
have
let's do
it,
it. Let's
JD.
ask questions about.
Well, let's
oh,
talk
yeah,
to
yeah,
Chad.
yeah.
How do
We
you know
just-
Chad? What is your history with
Oh,
Chad?
yes, this
Let's
is a
go
good
back.
story.
Let's go back, Michelle. Before we go
Oh,
forward.
oh, I was gonna. Okay. Well, where I was gonna.
I
You
just
see that?
Wayne's.
You
I just
see how
Wayne's
she's-
World. We're
right,
going back in
everyone.
time.
All right.
I'm cheesing
Once upon a time,
Oh, not that far.
there was a really cute girl. She weighed a lot less, and she was
Not
a freshman
important.
in college, and her name was Michelle.
Oh my
No.
God.
So.
Oh, I know
Chad
that
and-
girl. She loved going to open houses.
Yeah. Oh my
Every
God.
week, another open house.
I am just.
Referencing
I'm the
another
butt of every
podcast.
joke, Chad. So Chad and I
You're
met
the
our
butt.
freshman year in college, and we were at Colorado State. Both of us were out of towners. I'm from the East Coast. He's from the West Coast. And basically, in short, and I don't know if Chad knows this, but literally we had these tower dorms, right? And you go up in the elevator, and it was divided by the sexes. So if you went to the right side of the dorm, it was all the girls, and then the left was all the boys, and you know how well that
All right, get to the meat.
Okay. So anyway, every single girl on campus was obsessed with Chad.
Chad.
He was quite surfer boy stud back in the day, not gonna lie. And so in my head,
looks
just
kinda
because I'm a
studly
little
out
bit
there
of a
with his-
rebel, I was like, "Pfft, I am not gonna like him. Ew, I'm just not even gonna. I had it for this basketball player. Anyway, he and I became best buddies. And Chad introduced me to the art of the ganj. No, I'm just kidding. I never smoked weed, but I learned how to get a towel wet and put it at the door so the hall monitors.
Yeah,
You
you're
know
a
the
backup.
dorm.
Oh,
what
I
were they
didn't
called?
know that.
The dorm
Don't
monitors.
give out the secrets.
Anyway, it was so the air wouldn't get through. So, but anyway,
We'd also blow into the wet towel too, because that would help trap the smoke.
yeah. So there's
I love-
now there's
I love that
gummies. We
people
didn't
think
have that back in college.
Oh
But anyway,
my,
I would get
you
the
learned
contact
so
high
much
because
on
I
this
was such a
podcast.
little prudy then, and I was like, I don't smoke. But in the room, as it would just because everything was blocked. you
Okay,
would
so
get-
Chad was a pothead. So tell
Chad
us
was a
more.
pothead.
You're
but
just
anyway,
you're
if
not
you weren't
you're
a
dancing
skier
around
or
the
a
subject.
pothead, we ended up both transferring after our freshman year, right?
I was sophomore year, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, after the summer, I left and I went and visited him in Tahoe, and then I developed a crush for him, but we were locked in the friend zone.
The friend
Friend
zone.
We were
zone.
locked in the friend zone at that point. He was a boat marina guy. He would like bring in all the boats at Tahoe. That was his job, and I went
That's
out
cool.
to visit him. And anyway, so then he did a semester in DC, which is where I transferred to GW. And which I don't know if I lied to you. Remember when I would cut hair freshman year? I cut hair for Froyo. I didn't have much money, and so I told all
Oh,
the
you
guys
wanted
in
to
the
get
dorm, I was
Froyo.
like, "Oh my god, I'm an amazing hairstylist. I can cut hair." And
Oh, and yogurt was the payment.
Yeah.
I thought you were cutting hair at Froyo, and they were
Yeah.
so
No,
loving
so I
that.
would cut hair
You're
for
like-
Froyo. That's a poor girl's hustle in freshman year of college. So Chad was one of my victims.
Oh my
I guess
God.
you could call.
That's funny.
Anyway, so he called, and this was before cell phones or anything. Two years later, he calls my parents' house because he probably had to look through a phone book. I mean, these are days that Gen Zs will never ever know. And so my mom called me because I had an apartment in Roslyn, and she's like, "Hey, some guy named Chad called," and I was like, "What?" I mean, we hadn't talked in years, and she said, "Yeah, he's actually here in DC doing a semester. Here's a number," and I about died. Well, anyway, when I called him, I don't know why I'd like never forget it. He's like, "Hey, are you still cutting hair?" It was so cute. So he came over and I gave him a haircut. But at that time we were both in
You
relationships.
gave him a trim.
again friend
At that
zone.
time,
He did
at
give
that time
some
Michelle
trim.
was working at Supercuts.
Oh.
No, I was. Shut up.
She
So
moved
Chad
up from Froyo.
calls. Chad calls to get a trim, and you're like, "Okay, I'll cut your hair."
Yeah.
Okay, see how that goes.
So
I got to hear more about this
Anyway.
friend zone later,
Yeah.
Chad. We want to
So what's
talk
your
about that.
side?
How did
Chad? I don't
get
know.
into
What's your
wine?
side of the
Yeah,
story?
tell us a little bit of your.
My side of that story,
Mhm.
it's that's pretty accurate, Michelle. I think that one of the things that that made our friendship kind of happen so quickly and with like a lot of like enthusiasm is just that we have a similar kind of energy, a similar perspective on life. Like you're very fun, you're optimistic, you've got great energy, it's attractive, it's fun to be around. And so I
Yes.
think that's really the base of our friendship, and that's why it's lasted for so long. I mean, we've kind of gotten distant here and there, whatever. But like I hear your voice, I see your face, like I still feel like, we're very connected, even though it's
Aw,
been, I don't know, what,
totally.
30 years,
I
20
know,
years since we
right?
first met each
What
other?
is Chad's marital status?
Yeah,
He's
what's up?
married with children.
Oh,
Back off.
damn it.
And
Lucky
that's
her.
Good, good
Lucky
for
her.
you. I would still be as well, but oh well, that's another story.
Oh,
That's a whole other
So
podcast.
Where's our
Chad
sound effects?
actually, when I went to visit him in Tahoe, he not made me, but encouraged. I jumped off an 80-foot cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Like a metaphorical
didn't
cliff of
make you.
love, or a
Right? Like I didn't push you.
You
I
didn't
didn't
push
like
me,
force you.
But you encouraged me, and I was so scared, but I stayed there. I was like, no, I'm going to do it. And everybody was like, we just want to hike and party. And like, but I just stayed on that edge of the cliff for like almost an hour until
80
I finally
foot, you would
did it.
die. What are you talking
It's
about?
No,
So,
there's
so
a way to
tall.
do it right. Now, the 80-foot cliff, I did it right. But then we went, it was Emerald Pools, right? What was that place
Yeah.
called? Emerald
Yeah,
Bay?
Emerald Pools.
Emerald Pools. So then you go to a next level, and it was way less, maybe like a 30-foot
You busted yourself up on that
I
one.
busted myself
Yeah,
up
you
on
got
that one.
confident. You
Mm.
got
I don't
lax.
know, Chad. Did you see? I had my whole backside was black and blue.
Oh,
the
not
next day.
good.
So
It's
the
all-
key,
Sorry.
the key is, and this is true
Entry.
for both women and men, is to keep your legs together.
Good luck. Okay.
Wow. Where were you in 1990? Thanks,
But
Chad.
seriously, you
it's
do,
a
like,
little
don't you, like, walk
late.
your
Thing I've
ankles
had
and
a
hold,
hard
like-
time with.
Lock
your
your
chest?
ankles and hold
Yeah,
your chest
it's the
and plug
pencil.
your nose.
Literally, because if your arms went, your arms would be black and
everything
blue.
was
Oh,
anyway.
so
It was amazing. I'll never forget that time. But anyway,
What good times. Good times, Chad.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're here to drink about it.
And now we're here to
That's
drink
right.
about it. So, how did you? The one thing that I never forgot was we were in our 20s. I was cutting your hair. You were doing a semester in DC, and we were talking about dreams, right? Which a lot of Gen Zs, they're in college. They think they have it all figured out. We all did those courses that have nothing to do with our current careers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm cutting Chad's hair, and I said, "What do you want to do with your life? What are you going to do? Like, you're here in a semester in DC. Are you going to be a politician?" He goes, "You know what? I want to start a winery." And I thought
Wow.
that was really different. I mean, being an East Coaster, as well as, just never hearing a 20-year-old say he would want to open a winery.
So you had always loved wine. Is that had you had an affinity for it before you decided to go? What was your background?
Well, I was lucky. I was exposed to it at an early age. So my love for wine really was more coming from like the farming side of it, or working
Oh.
with Mother Nature, being outdoors. The fact that it was growing fruit to turn into wine was just like an added bonus. So
Right.
to be honest, like I really didn't really appreciate wine in terms of aroma, flavor, texture until, maybe the mid 20s. But my family started growing grapes up in Sonoma County in the early to mid 80s. And so that's when before I met Michelle. I mean, Michelle and I graduated high school in 89. So this is like pre high school even. And so I was exposed to that side of it a lot. And then also always having good wine on the table with my family. Never really paid a lot of attention to it, to be honest. I mean, I was more interested in beer and like who I sat next to in math class than I was, interested in wine. But what kind of turned me on to like the wine side of it was really like being in college. And to me, it was normal. But to my friends, they were like, "Whoa, you have access to wine? Like, you have access to, we can go wine tasting and get free tastings." And,
Yeah.
and I was kind of like, well, yeah, we could do that anytime you want. And so that's when I realized that it was actually a kind of a cool thing. And then, once I connected, the fruit into the wine part of it, like tasting our wine from our property out of barrel, that's when all these kind of dots got connected. And I was like, ooh, this is what I want to do the rest of my life.
Wow.
It is a fascinating art.
It is.
I mean,
It's a
I've
culture.
been to so many
The wine
wineries,
culture.
And difficult, right? The competition is intense. The product itself can
Competition.
be so vulnerable to the weather and environment.
Exactly.
yeah,
and-
you're beholden by.
I'm
many
curious. I mean,
forces.
on a serious note about wine. I mean, first of all, how cool is it to go to a grocery store and just see your name all over a bottle of
Melville.
wine? That's cool. I love
It is
that.
cool.
For anybody who is listening and not watching our vidcast, the Melville wine bottle is absolutely gorgeous. Got this red wax on top. At least the Pinot Noir does.
Where's the rosé? I
rosé.
love
Oh, no,
the
this is
rosé.
rosé.
That is rosé.
Yeah, the
No, that's
rosé
the
is
Pinot.
really
No, but
good.
it says
You can-
rosé here too.
What?
I think
Yeah,
it's
it's a
just
Pinot Rosé.
Oh,
Pinot
Pinot
rosé.
rosé.
Talk to us about the Pinot rosé. Or what are
my
your
God.
best sellers? Let's talk about
So,
wine.
Well, where
Let's just talk about the culture of it. I mean,
Yeah.
we could get into all the. They need to go to your winery. They can go
Mm-hmm.
learn about how the making of it. I want to talk a little bit about these wines, but I want to know more about your story,
Yeah, I
like
do
you.
Yeah, so you started when did you get the
delicious,
Lompoc? Am I saying it right? Lompoc?
Lompoc.
Yeah, Lompoc.
When did you move to the
Show
Lompoc
wants a
area?
Lompoc right
Because
now.
obviously, if you've been doing it for over 24 years, you probably were one of the trailblazers for that zone of wine,
Yeah,
right?
we were. I mean, there
'cause-
was a couple vineyards planted here in our area before we got here, but the majority of the vineyards went in, after we got here. So I guess kind of in a way we are one of the pioneers, but really, back in the day, so we planted the vineyard in 97 and 98. There really wasn't a whole lot going on. I was, I don't know, 25 at the time, and I was living in a trailer on the property with my brother, and he and I just, my dad was paying us minimum wage to plant the vineyard, and it was all about just work, but it wasn't really work because you're just so excited to wake up every day and get out there and get everything done that needed to get done, because you knew that all that hard work, was going to pay off, and you knew that what you were doing was right, and you knew that there was this level of excitement that goes into all that hard work, right? And so it takes a while. I mean, it takes 3 years to get any fruit after you
Wow.
plant the
Wow, I
vine,
didn't know
right?
that.
The
So
ultimate
then they gave us,
delayed gratification.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
didn't
you
know
are
that.
like in the business of delayed gratification.
yeah, totally. And then, like JD was saying, it's also just very risky because you're basing your whole entire business off of basically the way Mother Nature behaves, right? Now, luckily, we're in an area where it has very consistent weather. And so that's a huge advantage. But if you're in an area like, I think Mindy, you mentioned earlier, like you did a Zoom on in France, the weather there is a lot less predictable and a lot less consistent. So it's even more scary. But regardless, basing any business off of Mother Nature, in other words, you don't control it, right?
Mhm.
So it's hard to kind of navigate through all the obstacles, but that's part of our job. And so what we do personally, like what our vineyard and winery is set up for is, 100% estate, which means that we own our own land and we do all of our own farming, right? So we don't buy fruit from anyone. And most wine is made in the way where you are purchasing fruit from different vineyards and you make great wine. And it's totally a good way to do it. But we've dedicated ourselves to not do it that way. We only use our own fruit off of our own land. So we really focus and emphasize the farming of it. As a matter of fact, Michelle said it earlier, like when she was introducing me as the head wine grower. So wine growing is what we do, not wine making. There's a little bit of difference
there's
there.
a difference.
I like that. And you have how much is your property and what in that scope? I mean, I've watched your Instagram lives. By the way, your Instagram is Melville Winery, right?
Melville_winery. Yeah.
Okay.
Melville.
So he does a lot of live
1 L,
Instagrams
2
with
Ls.
celebrities and different people who are in the wine industry that are, living their best life and really educating people on the culture. But I heard you talk about like your particular landscape and how different sections actually have different flavors, not just because the actual grape is different, but the land, the soil, right? Or it being in its proximity to the ocean. Or can you explain
I mean,
that?
that's kind of the art of what I do. On one level, it's all farming and making sure that the vines are getting the adequate nutrients and the water, and they're being managed in the way that you want. And then the other side of it is I'm in the cellar, trying to capture all the beautiful nuances that exist outside. And so, there's an art to it. Wine is always going to be a combination of science and art. And some people look at it where it's more scientific, where you make wine through a laboratory and you match numbers and you do all this other kind of alchemy, where I kind of take the opposite approach. It's way more artistic and using my intuition. So it's intuitive winemaking. In order to have a good intuition, though, you gotta be out in the vineyard. You gotta know what the vines are going through, and and you have to understand what it is that each of those kind of different blocks are trying to say, right? So the whole process is about kind of eliminating yourself from the process so that you're allowing Mother Nature to have, as pure and clear of a voice. I know it sounds super romantic.
No, it's
and
very
whatever,
well. Wine is romantic.
Yeah.
it certainly can be, I think it is. And the thing about wine to me is that it is art. It's not a commodity. It's not something that should always smell and taste the same no matter what vintage, or like, Coca-Cola. Like wine is like a piece of art, or your favorite like song or your favorite movie. Like it evokes some kind of emotion out of you, and that's the whole point, right? If wine doesn't have that impact on me, then I'm not interested. I'll move on to the next one, or I'll figure something else out. But like, that's what's so, I think, interesting about wine. And I study wine. Like, I don't drink wine. Occasionally I will drink wine, but like for me, there's so much that goes into it. It's hard for me to not like look at it from an artist perspective.
Well, what an
about
appreciation you
trends?
have of it.
What about trends? Like trends, what was it, 2 years ago? Everything, rosé all day, rosé all day. Yeah. And, we had a giant floaty.
And that was just at Michelle's house alone.
Party. So rosé. Did you go, oh crap, like we weren't selling a bunch of rosé, and now all of a sudden you're on trend? We actually have our rosés.
Delicious.
What happened with the rosé trend, and is it falling out? Is there a new rosé on the pike? Like, could you give us like a little taste of the future, or what happened?
There's always trends, in the marketplace, and
this is really good rosé.
What's coming tomorrow is going to be, different than what's today and yesterday. And so I don't, we make a conscious decision. We don't chase the trends. We don't try to start new trends. We just do what we do. We try to just do it really, really well, which again is just our land, our farming. As far as like, we've always done, well, not always. We've done rosé for the past, 12 or 15 years, but we're evolving as well, but we don't follow the trends. I mean, one of the trends right now is natural wine, right? So it's wine that's,
what is that?
Not made with any sulfur and all organically grown. And, there's a lot of kind of, it's a very loose definition, to be honest. So it's hard to kind of define exactly what that means. But my wine is, under the criteria of natural wine, but I don't market it as
that way.
Natural wine. I don't market it as, below 14%, which was a trend for a little while. I don't market it in any other way except that it's, grown by hand, it's made by hand, and it comes off of one property, and that's it.
Hey, Chad, I'm curious from a business to business sort of question here about wine. Something I like to ask people who start businesses. Take us back to the moment where you finally could take a deep exhale and like, oh my gosh, we're a success. Like, we have put so much into this. We have, obviously a 3-year investment before you can show any kind of, maybe show a return. I mean, that's a big gamble. So what was that first moment where you and your family really felt like, this has paid off?
Yeah, so there's 3 years to get any fruit, right? And then it's an additional year to convert that into wine. And then basically, a solid half a year after that before it's actually kind of worthy to start being consumed. So on one level, it's a 5-year process. Wow. But to answer your question, I think that, on paper, the vineyard was dialed, right? I mean, everything was just perfect. We matched, rootstock to soil type, and then to clone to rootstock. We already knew we were in the right climate. We already knew we had the right soils. And we obviously, well, not obviously, but we knew how to farm too, because of our experience up in Sonoma. And that's mostly coming from my dad. And so you get the fruit, you have a really good feeling going into it, right? You don't know what the result is going to be, but you just know that you've done everything right. And then when you actually get to the point of, harvesting your first crop after 3 years, and then you watch it, you smell it, you taste it during fermentation. You're like, ooh, this is, going great. Like, this is great. It's not until about maybe that 3.5-year mark where you can taste stuff out of barrel where you're like, holy shit, like, this is it. Like, everything is kind of lining up. Now, there's bumps in the road, right? Just like anything else. But that was the moment where it was like, ooh, this is not only paying off, but the future is bright. Like if we can pull this off right now with young vines and, our limited knowledge of this, new area, like we're only going to get better. And so that's kind of fun too, to think about, because, wine, like you only harvest fruit from vines once a year, right? So in a way you only get one swing at the plate, and then you got to wait a whole nother year to get another pitch. So there's a lot of time in between that you are always thinking about how you would approach something differently, or what you perhaps, you made a mistake that you learned from. It's a process. Like right now, I'm already starting to make the 2020 vintage, even though we don't have any fruit to pick yet.
Wow.
But it's like these ideas, it's just constantly evolving. So we're in our 23rd year of production.
Wow. Congratulations.
And
That's a big
I like
deal.
to think that we get better every
about the
single
long
year at
haul,
understanding the land, at making better wine. And so the wines that we're making today are even better than the ones that we made yesterday.
Wow.
So which
So
one,
this one
will get us the least hungover?
Oh yeah. Is there a type
That's
of? We're
it's a
about to break
question
into the
inquiring minds
red.
want to know. Like what?
Yeah. So Mindy, when you say that, do you mean that you've actually consumed the whole bottle, or you mean just a glass?
I know that was such
Yeah.
an alcoholic question.
I love that. Chad always
Which
says
one
that.
can I drink the
Well, if
most
you drink
of
the
with the
whole
Which one
least
can I drink the most? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a key element
so
there
good.
is to look at the alcohol percentage,
Right. Which
So
you have over.
if you're
13
looking at
usually.
wines that are like 15%,
This is 13.9.
and I know that it may not seem
That's
like
high.
a big difference between 15 and 13%,
Yeah.
but there is a tremendous difference on the effect of on your body. So
Wow.
if you have a 15% alcohol wine, and let's just say you split it with your husband, or your friend, or whatever.
Or your left hand and your right hand.
Yeah, you could do that too. But
Maybe the right hand's gonna drink.
not only is it going to get you, buzzed quicker and maybe even a deeper buzz, but it will, in fact, slow you down the next morning. Now, I mentioned it earlier, but you counter that with water. Like, so,
Lots of water
make sure you
between.
just drink a big old glass of water before you go to bed.
Mhm.
And what's your favorite breakfast wine?
Sparkling.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
With orange juice.
What wine pairs well with co-parenting and homeschooling?
Jack.
Hey, there's a wine for everything. You guys know that. I mean, that's the deal, right? That's what we do. There's a wine for every single thing.
Do you think, because like you said, when we were in college in the early 90s, it was all about beer and Jaeger. Do you feel like the millennials and the Gen Zs are drinking more wine? Like, how are you trying to market, or if at all, to the younglings that are coming up and they're going to be your next generation of wine
Youngling.
drinkers?
It's a really good question, Michelle. I mean, I don't know the answer. I study,
the
I
wine.
read the articles that come out about that stuff, the people that do study it, and I try to, disseminate it and try to figure out how we can kind of tap into that world. And
Well, we're
It's
here to
not
help.
about-
This is the purpose of our show.
Yes,
We're bridging
exactly.
we're bridging the midlifers with the millennials, and
Yep.
yeah,
they're gonna get on the wine train, and
It's
we're
the
gonna
wine
get you more
bridge.
biz.
so,
I actually
and
think
so we look
demystifying
at it
alcohol is
like
important.
we just do what we do. We're not designing a
Do what I
label
do.
that's going to catch the eye of the younger generation. We're not making a wine in a style that perhaps would capture
If you
the
build
younger
it, they will
generation.
come.
We just do what
but
we
you're
do,
doing
right?
more
And
social
then-
media, and that's something that you don't have to dangle the carrot of the obvious, like putting a sexy label on something. You
Right.
can just be, like you said, just put the information out, be more available in
Like
social
putting it
media.
out on Friend Some and Then Some, available
right.
on Instagram,
Exactly.
Facebook, and
You know what?
YouTube.
Yeah. And we had an argument
plug,
actually
man.
in one of our prior podcasts about boxed wine. We went off on this tangent about boxed wine and that. Can you tell us, because there were some people with various opinions about it, and it is making an uptrend.
I got in trouble over this topic once,
Yes,
so
you
I have to be
did.
very
Yes.
careful.
Yes. So we
Yes,
want
you
to
do.
hear from a wine connoisseur grower's point of view. What is the difference? And
Yeah.
is there a difference?
Do you make a
in-
nice card Bordeaux?
Yeah.
Did you just come up with that? That's pretty clever.
Card Bordeaux. I think you should.
Cardboard dough.
What is the question exactly?
What is your opinion?
What's the best box wine, Dad? Can you just
Do
point
you
us in a
believe
direction
in
of a
box
good,
wine,
cheap
or are you
thrill?
like, oh my God?
Do
that's
people
just
in the
awful.
winemaking industry go, Oh, boxed wine.
Yeah, do they scoff?
Well, I mean, to a certain
Snubadog.
degree. I mean, if I you know, it's hard for I think anyone in the industry, or at least from my side of the industry, on a production level, to take box wine seriously. But box wine isn't trying to be serious, right? So if the question is, are there any good box wines out there? Yeah, if you look at just the category of box wine, sure, I'm sure you can. But is it going to be comparable to something like that's in
Maybe
front
it
of your
has a
face right now?
lesser
Like,
percentage
no,
of
it's
alcohol.
not. But there's also a time and place. I mean, my wife and I,
Exactly.
this was like, I don't know, 20 years ago, I think, maybe even longer. We went kayaked. We were in New Zealand. We went through Abel Tasman National Park on a kayak, and it was like a 5-day, you know, you stop on the beach and you camp, right? And we grabbed a box of wine and we had the best time, right? But
How fun.
if you gave me that same box of wine and I was, you know, at your house to have,
Environmental.
you
It's
know,
all the
dinner,
environment.
you know,
You would have been
I
like,
don't know,
I'm
you know,
okay.
like airplane wine is actually a better example for me because I will be more likely to have wine on an airplane than I would out of a box. And even airplane wine, for the most part, is really tough for me to swig down, unless, of course, I'm just like, you know, popping an Ambien. I need something to.
Oh Lord, do not combine Ambien and wine, people. That is, do not.
Oh, that's the key, though. That's the best combination, even though it says specifically not to do that.
We do not condone the use and combining drugs and alcohol on your flight to anywhere.
But speaking of travel and airplanes and wine, I do find the boxes travel less clunky.
Yes.
And they fit. They stack well in the pantry.
Yeah.
Much better than wine cellar. Who needs a wine cellar? I got a pantry.
I know personal consumption has gone up. We've seen like online ordering is up 200 some percent.
Right.
But does that make up for like what the restaurants and the you know
Aren't ordering?
Yeah.
How's
like,
the wine
is
business going right now during
commercials
quarantine?
so down because there's no restaurants or hotels buying your wine, but consumer is way up. Is it balanced at all? Or are you guys suffering?
Not really. I
in
mean,
quarantine?
we're hurting because of the restaurant industry being closed.
Yeah.
And, but you know, where you do find a little bit more, like for me, so that's considered the wholesale market. So, you know, I have wine merchants that are still buying our wine and reselling it. And yes, our online sales are up a lot, and it's partly because we're being more aggressive with our offerings. Like I'm offering like library wine, right? So people have an opportunity to buy something that I've like cellared perfectly for 15 years, and so those things have been really successful. But at the same time, there's a cost to that, right? Because I'm depleting my library, and I'd like to hold on to it, you know. But this is a way to generate revenue. So yeah, it's really tricky out there right now as a wine producer. I mean, there's going to be, I mean, the things that I've read right now, you know, maybe 20, 30, 40% of the restaurants don't ever reopen, right? And so if you take that kind of into account and you look at, like, you study the model, well, there's got to be, you know, maybe 10, 20, 30% of wineries that don't survive this as well, right? So it's tough. There's no doubt about it.
Gosh, so
That's
sad.
heartbreaking. It really is. And I think this time is when you see the people who can pivot and, like you said, alter your fan base. You're tapping into your library and doing things, your online sales, or you probably didn't have this much time for all the social media that you're doing, which would gain your reach when you're totally growing and business as usual. You don't have time for that. But I say we all raise a glass here.
Indeed.
Yeah.
You
How
have a
about
glass
three?
too, right?
We still have
I do.
one more big topic to talk about.
Oh, the
what's
friend
that?
zone?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
I thought we went there. No,
Did
you're
we
right.
go there?
No,
This is
I want to hear a
amazing.
friend zone.
Well,
pic-
first of all,
Do you-
I just like to comment
let's hold
on the wine. This rosé, I've had all the rosés.
It's delicious.
This one is really easy and nice. I really like it.
And this girl's
I
been
really like it.
been some places, okay, Chad?
I've slept with a lot of rosé, and this one does
She's
it for me.
She's well traveled.
She's a
Let's
good
just
girl.
say that.
She's easy on the tongue.
So her review is good.
I should say that Melville
Thank you,
Wines,
Penny.
I'm sure, like the rest of us
Where
and
can
all
we
of us
order
at
it?
Friendsome, we are still proponents of responsible drinking.
Yes.
Joking
Yes.
aside, we love to have a good laugh. But for anybody out there who's ever struggled with a little bit too much wine,
Yeah.
know that, you know, responsible drinking is where it's at. You don't, if you're going over the top, there's all
Yeah,
kinds of programs for
moderation.
help.
Moderation.
Just a little plug
Except
for those folks
cheese.
because I
don't moderate cheese.
had a rough time in my
Don't
life once. So why not?
So,
Where can we
does
buy a
anybody
case? Like,
else
someone
have
wants to buy a
friend
case.
zone?
So
Oh, I
wanna
do.
know about you.
I
But
do.
like, okay, hold on. Real quick. If you want to buy a case of Melville wine, you just the website melvillewinery.com or where's the
There
one?
you go.
There you go.
MelvilleWinery.com.
And then the
Melvillewinery.com.
Instagram is Melville _ right?
Winery.
Oh, there's an underscore. Melville _winery.
Yeah,
so you
on
can buy it
Instagram.
either
And
or.
he, like
It's
I said,
really, really
I just want to
delicious.
know,
It
Chad,
is.
because I think our listeners want to know. Was there ever a chance for Michelle? Was there ever maybe
Oh
a
my
moment where it
God.
wasn't going to be the friend zone, but
Here
it
it
was going to be
comes.
the friends with benefit zone?
JD's more familiar
That
with the
could have
friends with
happened.
benefits zone.
I was in my 20s, went to a lot of
I
open
don't
houses.
know. I think that, I mean, we never got out of the friend zone, right?
No.
But I think that at the same time, there's something special about that part of it, right? I think that like perhaps sometimes you go outside of the friend zone, and sometimes because you do that, you never get back to the friend zone, right? I mean, that's got to be something you guys talk about, right?
Yeah, it is true. But I think it is much easier for women. Like, say there's an unrequited romance between the woman has an attraction to the man, and he may not, back to her. It's easier to stay in that friend zone than I think vice versa. Than when the man has an attraction to the woman and she is not interested but would be friends, and the
Right.
ego, can get in the way. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, and it was another guy, so it wasn't. There was no women involved, but I'm trying to reach that hetero audience.
Yeah,
So-
when we talked about this topic, JD's like, I've never had that problem. Any guy that I've ever been attracted to was attracted
No,
to me
no,
too.
no, 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 no. I said
Not in
no,
the
no,
friend
that's
zone,
not
but on the
fair. That's not
50-yard
fair.
line.
What I said was I didn't fully understand what the friend zone was, because if someone was interested, I was not going to hang out and be their friend.
Right.
But there
No.
plenty of people were not interested.
No,
Most people are not interested.
Right. It's
Yeah.
No one likes me.
The theme is
You and I had to stay in
like
the friend zone, JD.
What was that comedian?
I put
who
Mindy
goes,
right in the
I like
friend
who
zone.
likes me. I like who likes me. Yeah.
I saw the look in Mindy's eye the first day I met her. She's
And
like,
he's like-
"Hi, I'm Mindy." I'm like, "Hi, I'm gay." So you just need to
She
put
was
those fangs
undressing.
away.
She was undressing
Woo!
him with her eyes.
Hello. Have you ever felt violated and yet the person hasn't even touched you?
Yes.
What is happening?
How
That's
about when
so
you
funny.
violated me in Vegas? You
Anyway.
did touch me.
Well, I mean,
No.
I know we talked
No,
about
Chad
it.
and I never even kissed. I mean, maybe I
No.
like Drew Barrymore and the never been kissed.
And now he's married, so you're never going to make it a long poke.
No, and and that's interesting because like we want to play to our younglings too. That's when the friend zone happens. When you're in that college age, young work age. When you get older and you're married, and that's a really weird thing. When
Yeah, when you're trying to date somebody while you're married.
You're
That
best
is a really
friends
weird
with-
thing, Michelle. How does that work?
That's
No,
how
but I
most
mean,
marriages
like-
end.
It really changes when you're married, the friend zone. Yeah, I hope so. My boyfriend put me in the
That's what I'm
friend zone
saying,
a
it
long time
doesn't-
ago.
It doesn't happen. It's not an issue, or
Just
it's
kidding,
just
Georgie, I love you.
just don't have male friends anymore when
Right.
you get to my age, unless you're gay. But hello, you're my bestie.
Yeah.
Because it is awkward. Like, who am I? I'm going to be a best friend with a guy who has a wife. Like, that's
Oh, yeah.
inappropriate.
That's actually not appropriate
And
according
you-
to a couple books I've read. You should
Exactly.
not have conversations
You
with
don't want to
Mindy's
confide in
literate.
the opposite sex when you've got a partner. Like, that's just rude. And then, but then you have couples, right? There's always times where your best friend or the couples are hitting it off.
This is
But
actually
then
a
there's
whole other
time when
podcast, because that is
you
not true in the
can't
gay world.
stand your friend's partner, and then that causes a rift. Like, those are our midlife issues now, but the friend zone issue is really like for the 20-something.
We're going to talk about that in the next podcast a little further.
Yeah,
What?
I do think
The
that because
friend
what you
zone
just
and
said.
the day. I think those are all
Yeah,
very
because
interesting
men
topics.
I'm sure people who are in same-sex relationships have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of friends of the same sex. So it's not quite the same in terms
But it's
of
a
like.
dance. It's
There
a
is,
dance.
there is. Oh, of course.
It's a respectable dance
There's
you
a
have to do.
respect.
I would just say too that like I don't have that many friends of the opposite sex that are just purely friends. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Does that make sense?
You just
Yeah.
when you get married, that's your best friend
Yeah.
of the opposite
Yeah.
sex, and you really share everything you would share with that person.
Or you should.
Yeah,
But
and
now
if
that
you're
you're part
having
of the
intimate
friend zone-
relationships with,
Yeah.
but then you got a problem in your marriage if you're
Yeah.
not talking to your wife. I love how Chad has gone from
I do.
wine
This guy's
grower
wise.
to
He
can
relationship
flip
a
marriage
script.
expert.
He can flip a script, no problem.
Exactly.
I warned him. Well, and two, for me, just to share a little, and then we'll go. But like for me, now being a single mom, it is such a mind bleep, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Because different women now who are married look at me like, or if we're at a party, like I give a damn about your husband. Like I don't want
Oh,
your husband.
Lord,
I already had a
Lord.
shitty husband. Like I don't want yours. And so it's
know.
this weird dynamic of like, I'm like this
Yeah.
pariah or something at a
I
party.
used to say like,
She's after my
"Why-
husband."
Why get married and make one man miserable when I can date and make a million men miserable?
Yeah. No, I don't, sis. Don't want your man.
Don't
no,
want him.
thank you.
That's so funny.
Anyway, if you know any really nice men in the wine industry that you could set me up with, Chad.
So we're talking about making lists of what you want out of a partner, and the number one thing on Michelle's list is owns a winery, or has access to a winery, or has access to lots of wine. She's not picky. Can
and
be in
I'm
a
not
box.
even a drinker, so Mindy's
know any of the Franzia
recommendation of
guys?
your wine is good
I'm gonna
because
set
she
Michelle up.
drinks, and she's had very well traveled. My
God, that was
recommendation of
funny.
your wine is that I'm not a big drinker, and so some alcohols are just really they don't do well with my palate. I broke out some. I hadn't drank since my birthday party.
On the bus.
Okay, Chad, that's a whole nother story.
Oh, wow.
But alcohol does something. It wasn't wine, but I hadn't had anything to drink.
I think we've
since
got video of that.
October.
Let's show
I
that
think-
video.
I do think we
Let's
should.
roll
This is
video.
No,
very-
we are never.
Yes, we
That
are.
is in the blackmail vault, and no one will ever see what I did on my birthday last year.
Oh, Lizzo.
It wasn't even my 50th.
That was a good song that was playing.
Chad recently turned 50.
Happy
Yeah,
birthday.
Oh, happy
almost.
belated,
This
Chad.
October, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mindy turned 50.
Are you a
la-
Libra?
You're a Libra
Yeah.
too? Oh my God, I'm a Libra
Libra's
too.
unite.
My mom's a Libra.
What's your birthday?
I'm October 6th.
Oh,
he's
the
right
day after my
there.
mom. Oh, New Year's baby.
I'm
Congratulations,
October
parents.
20th. I'm gonna
You know
be
what that
50
means.
next year. Hey, maybe we can make a pact, Chad, and our everybody glass up.
Oh,
Okay.
boy. Really?
Our
Again?
first
Should we?
Friendsome retreat will be at Melville Winery. What do you
Oh.
say,
Whenever-
guys?
do that?
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Done.
That's
All
a
right.
Cheers.
good idea.
We love
There
you,
you go.
Chad.
Set it
Now
down.
you're officially part of the Friendsome.
I know. And,
And-
since all of our listeners are also drinking right now, cheers yourself.
Yeah.
yourself.
Yay.
We love you.
We love you guys.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for joining us today on
We
Friends.
hope
Thank
we
you,
didn't
guys.
offend you too much. Sorry for being.
That's right. And
So
remember, if
open.
you're in the friend zone right now, order some Melville wine and send it to her. That's the way to get out of the friend zone. And also try being more attractive and getting a better job.
Yeah, that was the one tip, Chad. We saw a video about the Friendsome. Tips on how to get out of the friend zone. Number one,
Be more attractive. And that was the whole list.
That was it.
That was it. Reasons that men might think that they're more than the friend zone. She was blinking with both eyes.
You were in the same
she
room.
was awake and in the same room. She must love me. Oh.
That's great. That's so funny. I mean, there's got to be like so much material there.
Yes,
So
there
much.
is. There is.
Well,
Oh my
thank you
God.
so much, Chad. You were a delight to talk to, and I really love learning about starting a winery.
Hey, so you can send the next case of your winery to. I'll give you my
Hey,
address. It's
hey, I paid for this.
I
Shit.
know,
You're
Michelle-
not getting some
Michelle
freebies.
bought this, Chad. What kind of friend are
That's
you?
because we
Oh my
support
God,
our
that's
friends'
clear.
businesses.
No, we
Okay.
support. Hello.
He doesn't. It wasn't
Fine.
donated to him.
All right, we're gonna end on a quote.
I gave
Chad.
her a good discount.
Sorry,
Yes, you did. You gave me the
grapes are
friends and family
free.
That's
discount.
right.
Oh,
Listen, we're gonna end on a quote. Everybody, raise your glass.
raising.
Mm-hmm.
How about the one
We
that
love
says,
quotes at Friendsome and Then Some. So if you ever have any good quotes, guys, text us or Instagram us. Chad, if you have any. But I saw one, and I know I'm going to get it wrong because I'm going to bosh it if I don't read it. But gardeners are the biggest believers in the future.
gardeners?
And our number one favorite gardener, grower, Chad Melville.
Chad, to the
We love
future,
you. To the
Chad. To the future.
In all of the
Future.
wake of, COVID, we're still looking to the future.
Absolutely.
Just like Chad. That's a great note for friends to think about. Be like a wine grower. Think 3 years ahead.
That's right. That's what we all are doing
Plus.
right now.
We'll
be there.
just don't worry
This too
about what's
shall
going
pass.
on now.
It
Yes,
will.
this too shall pass. Let's
And
drink.
so will this wine. As
And in
I
the
consume
meantime, we've got wine.
it. Mm-hmm.
Love you, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks,
You guys
Chad.
are fun.
Thanks for joining our friends. Sim, you are now official
Our
member
first
of the
retreat.
pack.
Yes.
That was hot. Great friends,
Promises.
Chad. Bye, everybody. We love
Bye,
you.
Thank you.
Yay! Friends and then some.
We'll see you next time.